There is a moment that sneaks up on you. It does not announce itself with tragedy or loss. It does not arrive with silence. It comes quietly, in the middle of an ordinary day. When you are doing what you have always done, and suddenly, a thought breaks through the noise. What if I have been wrong about what really matters? I did not wake up at 90 with regret. I woke up in my 40s with comfort, in my 50s with routine, in my 60s with reputation. Everything looks stable, responsible, successful, even. But beneath that stability was something I refused to look at, a slow drift, a quiet compromise. Repeated so many times it became invisible. For decades, I believed I was building a life. What I was actually building was a distraction from the questions that scared me. Am I living intentionally? Or am I just following momentum? Am I choosing this path? Or am I just continuing it because? Stopping would be uncomfortable. No one warns you about this mistake because it looks mature. It looks disciplined. It looks normal. That is why it is dangerous. It steals you without resistance. It feels safe while it quietly knows your world. If you are listening right now, you still have time, but only if you are willing to see what most people only admit when it is too late. The day I realized I had been living on autopilot, it happened on a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. I was driving a route I had driven for years, listening to the same kind of news, thinking the same kind of thoughts, and I realized I could predict my entire week without effort. Not because I was organized, but because I was repeating myself. I knew what I would say in meetings. I knew what I would eat. I knew how I would respond when someone asked how I was doing. I even knew the tone of my own laughter. It was efficient, predictable, polished, and that was the problem. Somewhere along the way, I stopped choosing and started defaulting. I stopped asking why and started assuming this is just how life works. The dreams I once questioned became hobbies. The risks I once considered became impractical. The conversations I meant to have became postponed. Autopilot feels productive. You move fast. You get things done. But you are not steering. You are just maintaining direction. And if the direction was never consciously chosen, where are you actually heading? That Tuesday, I understood something uncomfortable. I had not made a bold mistake. I had made a subtle one. I had confused motion with intention. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. The invisible script I never questioned and used to believe my life was a result of my choices. That belief felt empowering. But when I began to examine those choices, I noticed something unsettling. Most of them were not born from deep conviction. They were inherited. There is a script handed to you early. Study hard. Choose something stable. Build security. Avoid risk. Do not disappoint. Do not fall behind. It sounds responsible. It sounds wise. And because everyone around you is following the same script, you rarely stop to question who wrote it. I followed it with discipline. I checked the boxes. I met expectations. I moved forward. But I never paused to ask whether the milestones I was chasing actually aligned with the person I was becoming. The script rewards compliance. It does not reward awareness. It tells you what success should look like, but it never asks you what success feels like. So you can arrive at a destination that looks impressive from the outside and still feel strangely detached from it. The real danger is not failure. The real danger is achieving a version of success that was never truly yours. And once you see the script, you start noticing how often you're performing rather than choosing. The comfort trap that felt like progress comfort does not announce itself as a trap. It feels earned. It feels like stability. After years of effort, you tell yourself you deserve a phase of ease. And you probably do, but comfort has a quiet side effect. It reduces urgency. When things are not broken, You stop examining them. When the bills are paid and the routine works, you stop questioning the direction. Progress becomes maintenance. Growth becomes repetition. I convinced myself that consistency meant advancement. But consistency without reflection is just prolonged stagnation. I was not evolving. I was preserving. Comfort narrows your vision slowly. It replaces curiosity with predictability. It makes bold decisions feel unnecessary. And because nothing is collapsing, you assume nothing needs to change. But life does not drift upward by default. It drifts downward into familiarity. The moment I realized I was protecting comfort more than pursuing growth, I felt exposed. Because comfort had become my excuse to stop challenging myself. The dangerous lie of latilita is one of the most seductive words in the human vocabulary. It sounds harmless. It sounds responsible. I will do it later when things calm down. I will say it later when the timing is better. I will pursue it later when I am more prepared. Later creates the illusion of intention without the discomfort of action. I postponed difficult conversations. I postponed risks. I postponed asking deeper questions about purpose. And every time I postponed something meaningful, I strengthened a habit of avoidance. The truth is that later rarely arrives in the form you expect. It arrives disguised as new responsibilities, new distractions, new reasons to delay again. Years pass quietly under the banner of preparation. The most painful realization was not that I had made wrong decisions. It was that I had delayed the right ones for too long. The subtle cost of constant busyness used to pride myself on being busy. Busy meant useful. Busy meant needed. Busy meant productive. It gave me identity. But busyness can become a shield. If you are always occupied, you never have to sit still long enough to confront what feels empty. Silence forces clarity. Busyness avoids it. I filled my schedule so tightly that there was no room left for reflection. No room to ask whether my energy was aligned with my values. No room to feel discomfort. When you are constantly moving, you feel important. But movement without direction is just exhaustion disguised as purpose. The moment I slowed down, even briefly, I realized how much I had been running from stillness. And stillness was exactly where the answers were waiting. The relationships I thought would wait for my relationships rarely collapse overnight. They fade in inches. I assumed that love, friendship, and connection were stable because they had history. I believed that shared time in the past guaranteed shared time in the future. But attention is the currency of connection, and I was spending mine elsewhere. I postponed calls. I minimized conversations. I replaced presence with efficiency. I told myself that once things settled, I would reconnect more deeply. But relationships do not pause while you focus on other priorities. They either grow or they weaken. When I noticed emotional distance in people who once felt close, I felt confusion. Then I felt responsibility. Because I had not lost them suddenly, I had neglected them gradually. The silent erosion of curiosity as a child. I questioned everything. As an adult, I began defending everything. Curiosity slowly turned into certainty. I stopped asking why and started explaining why not. New ideas felt inconvenient. Different perspectives felt threatening. Certainty feels strong. But curiosity keeps you alive. Without curiosity, life becomes repetition. You stop exploring internally. You stop reinventing yourself. You protect your current identity instead of expanding it. I realized that the loss of curiosity was not maturity. It was fear disguised as stability. And without curiosity, growth has nowhere to begin. The identity I outgrew, but never up to 10, there was a version of me that made sense at 30. That version was ambitious in specific ways. It had certain priorities. It valued certain outcomes. But as I aged, I changed. My values evolved. My perspective deepened. Yet I kept living according to goals set by a younger version of myself. I was loyal to an outdated identity. It is uncomfortable to admit that you have outgrown your own blueprint. It requires humility to redefine success. It requires courage to pivot publicly. So I stayed consistent, not because it was right, but because it was familiar. The moment I accepted that I was no longer aligned with the identity I was protecting, I felt both fear and freedom. The decisions I made out of fear, not conviction. Fear rarely announces itself clearly. It dresses as logic. I chose stability over risk because it was practical. One avoided confrontation because it was diplomatic. I delayed change because it was strategic. But when I revisited those decisions honestly, I saw a pattern. Many of them were not rooted in confidence. They were rooted in fear of loss, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty. Fear-driven decisions often look intelligent, but they slowly shrink your world. When you choose safety repeatedly, you reduce the space where courage could grow. And one day, you look back and realize you protected yourself from discomfort more than you pursued alignment. The price of not saying what needed to be said there are words that linger in silence for years. I did not express appreciation when I felt it. I did not apologize when I knew I should. I did not articulate boundaries when I needed them. I assumed there would be more opportunities, more time, a better moment. But unspoken truth accumulates weight. It creates invisible distance. It builds tension beneath the surface. When certain moments passed without those words being spoken, I understood something painful. Silence can shape your life. Just as powerfully as action, the day success felt empty. There was a day when I achieved something I had worked toward for years. Recognition, validation, goal completed. For a brief moment, I felt triumph. Then something unexpected happened. The satisfaction faded quickly. I had tied so much meaning to that achievement that I believed it would complete me. When it did not, I felt confused. Success is powerful, but when it becomes your sole definition of worth, it cannot sustain you. That was the day I realized that external milestones cannot replace internal clarity. The loneliness no one wants. There is a form of loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. You can be surrounded by people, respected, admired even, and still feel disconnected from yourself. That loneliness comes from misalignment, from living externally in ways that do not reflect your internal truth. It is subtle. It is quiet, and it grows slowly. When I admitted that I felt disconnected from my own life, I knew something had to change. What time slowly teaches about meaning. Time is not loud. It teaches through contrast. It shows you what lasts and what fades. It reveals which pursuits deepen you and which exhaust you. With distance, patterns become visible. You see how small compromises compound. You see how neglected priorities weaken foundations. Time refines perspective, but it also exposes what cannot be reclaimed. The one decision that would have changed everything. If I could go back, I would not change every decision. I would change one mindset. I would prioritize alignment over approval. I would measure my choices not by how impressive they looked, but by how truthful they felt. That single shift would have redirected countless smaller decisions. It would have required courage earlier, but it would have prevented regret later. If you are listening now, you still have time. You do not need decades to understand what took me so long. You only need honesty. Ask yourself whether you are choosing or defaulting, whether you are aligned or performing, whether you are postponing what matters most. Time will move forward regardless. The only question is whether you will move with intention. You still have time to steer, and that is the difference between a life repeated and a life consciously lived.